When Dr. Elizabeth Hartman became Boston General's most respected cardiac surgeon, patients trusted her with their lives during critical heart operations. But when her fentanyl addiction and organ trafficking schemes consumed her, she began harvesting organs from living patients and murdering medical staff who discovered her crimes, turning operating rooms into deadly harvesting facilities. Before starting the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now, let's get back to the video. The Massachusetts winter morning cast pale light through Boston General Hospital's surgical wing as Dr. Elizabeth Hartman organized patient charts and black market organ transport containers for what would become the most dangerous medical procedure of her 17-year career as New England's most accomplished cardiac surgeon and transplant specialist. At 49 years old, Elizabeth had established herself as Boston's premier heart surgeon, controlling critical care operations and organ transplant programs that attracted wealthy international patients, medical research organizations, and organ trafficking networks who valued her surgical expertise and her reputation for performing the most complex cardiac procedures, affecting life-saving medical operations and international transplant coordination. Elizabeth's surgical suite occupied the most advanced section of Boston General's cardiac wing, featuring state-of-the-art operating equipment, organ preservation systems, and transplant coordination facilities that allowed her to oversee the hospital's most critical cardiac surgeries while maintaining absolute control over organ procurement procedures worth millions in international medical cooperation, affecting transplant operations and surgical innovation throughout New England's medical community. The interior of Elizabeth's private office reflected her mastery of cardiac surgery and her understanding of medical expectations for both surgical excellence and absolute precision during the most critical life-saving procedures affecting patient survival, featuring walls displaying medical achievements from prestigious institutions, photographs of successful transplant operations, and testimonials from grateful patients whose lives had been saved through her surgical expertise and innovative cardiac techniques affecting medical advancement and surgical education. But beneath Elizabeth's reputation for medical excellence lay a dangerous combination of prescription fentanyl addiction, systematic organ trafficking, and calculated murder that had transformed her surgical operations into criminal enterprises where threatening medical staff and suspicious investigators met their fate through medical accidents and witness elimination during vulnerable surgical procedures and patient care activities. "Good morning, Dr. Hartman," said Dr. James Rodriguez, arriving for the weekly medical staff meeting about ongoing surgical cases and hospital oversight that required Elizabeth's coordination for complex cardiac procedures and transplant operations affecting patient care standards. James had recently discovered irregular organ procurement procedures and had begun questioning Elizabeth's explanations about transplant protocols that seemed to bypass normal hospital oversight processes and medical ethics requirements. "Good morning, Dr. Rodriguez," Elizabeth replied with the medical authority and surgical expertise that had made her legendary among Boston General personnel, who viewed her as both life-saving surgeon and medical innovator, capable of performing miraculous cardiac procedures through sophisticated surgical techniques and strategic transplant coordination affecting patient survival and medical advancement throughout the hospital's cardiac program. James had become Elizabeth's most dangerous colleague, not because of his demanding surgical requirements or his patient care responsibilities, but because of his recent discovery of unauthorized organ harvesting procedures and his growing awareness of the trafficking operation that Elizabeth had been conducting while supposedly providing legitimate cardiac surgery for hospital patients and medical education programs. What James didn't know was that Elizabeth had been systematically harvesting organs from living patients and murdering medical personnel for over 3 years, using her surgeon authority and access to operating rooms to coordinate international organ sales, while eliminating anyone who discovered her illegal harvesting activities or threatened to expose her criminal exploitation of medical resources for organ trafficking networks and black market transplant operations. Elizabeth's transformation from respected surgeon to calculating killer had begun 5 years earlier, when her prescription fentanyl addiction had escalated from legitimate pain management following a surgical injury to daily dependency that consumed her substantial medical salary and forced her into relationships with international organ trafficking organizations who offered enormous payments for access to healthy organs in surgical facilities for illegal harvesting operations targeting vulnerable patients. Her addiction cost over $5,000 per day, while her access to Boston General's surgical facilities and patient populations provided unprecedented opportunities for coordinating organ trafficking operations that generated millions through international criminal networks seeking healthy organs for wealthy clients who paid premium prices for black market transplants, avoiding legal waiting lists and medical oversight. Her criminal activities escalated when several medical staff and hospital oversight personnel discovered evidence of unauthorized surgical procedures and threatened to report their suspicions to medical boards and federal law enforcement agencies investigating organ trafficking targeting hospital patients and surgical programs throughout New England medical facilities. Elizabeth murdered her first victim, a suspicious surgical nurse who detected irregular organ procurement records, by orchestrating a medical accident using contaminated surgical equipment that appeared to be hospital-acquired infection rather than premeditated assassination designed to protect organ trafficking operations. The success of her first murder convinced Elizabeth that eliminating threatening medical personnel and suspicious oversight investigators was both necessary for protecting her trafficking operation and achievable, given her complete surgical authority and her ability to coordinate with international criminal networks who could stage medical accidents and eliminate witnesses while providing plausible cover stories involving surgical complications and medical emergencies. Over the following 3 years, Elizabeth murdered 11 additional individuals using various medical methods and trafficking coordination that took advantage of her surgeon authority, her access to criminal networks during vulnerable surgical procedures, and her ability to stage deaths as medical complications or hospital incidents that occurred during routine surgical activities with personnel who had access to sensitive information that could expose organ trafficking operations. Her victims had been carefully selected based on their discovery of her criminal activities, their potential cooperation with medical authorities, or their knowledge of surgical procedures that could expose her international trafficking coordination and systematic harvesting of patient organs affecting hospital oversight and medical ethics compliance. Her victims included Nurse Patricia Williams, a surgical coordinator who had discovered evidence of systematic organ harvesting and whose operating room consultation had resulted in fatal anesthesia complication staged by trafficking assets during routine surgical preparation. Dr. David Foster, who had reported suspicious surgical activities and whose Boston General meeting had ended in fatal medication error using drugs obtained through trafficking networks. And investigator Jennifer Martinez, a federal medical oversight specialist who had been tracking organ trafficking and whose hospital inspection had resulted in fatal exposure to concentrated fentanyl disguised as medical supply contamination, affecting federal oversight of hospital surgical operations. The organ trafficking operation had become extraordinarily sophisticated, with Elizabeth coordinating the systematic harvesting of healthy organs from patients during legitimate surgical procedures through carefully planned operations that removed additional organs beyond medical necessity, while patients were under anesthesia and unable to consent to organ procurement affecting their post-surgical health and survival. Cardiac surgery procedures served as primary organ harvesting operations, with Elizabeth personally coordinating the removal of kidneys, liver tissue, and other valuable organs from patients during heart surgeries that provided legitimate surgical access while allowing unauthorized organ procurement for international trafficking networks seeking healthy organs for wealthy clients worldwide. The most disturbing aspect of the operation was the systematic targeting of vulnerable patients for organ harvesting, with Elizabeth identifying suitable victims through medical consultations and pre-surgical evaluations that assessed organ quality and patient isolation from protective family networks who might investigate post-surgical complications or unexpected medical deterioration. Multiple patients had died or suffered severe complications as direct result of Elizabeth's unauthorized organ harvesting, with victims experiencing unexplained post-surgical problems, organ failure, and medical deterioration that was attributed to surgical complications rather than criminal organ theft affecting their health and survival prospects. Dr. Hartman, I need to discuss serious concerns about organ trafficking and reports of illegal harvesting connected to your surgical operations, said FBI Special Agent Sarah Torres of the Bureau's Healthcare Fraud Division, arriving at Elizabeth's office carrying federal warrants to inspect her surgical procedures and interview her about suspicious medical activities. Special Agent Torres specialized in investigating medical crimes and had developed expertise in recognizing patterns of organ trafficking and surgical exploitation affecting hospital operations throughout medical facilities. Special Agent Torres's investigation represented an existential threat to Elizabeth's criminal operation, as her federal medical crime expertise and access to healthcare fraud databases could expose the systematic organ trafficking operations and connect her to multiple suspicious deaths during surgical procedures and hospital meetings affecting federal oversight and medical law enforcement cooperation. Special Agent Torres, I think there may be some misunderstanding about complex cardiac surgery and the unfortunate reality that high-risk patients sometimes experience surgical complications despite advanced medical protocols and federal healthcare standards, Elizabeth said, while discreetly activating a concealed medical alert system that would summon corrupt medical staff who were part of her trafficking network for emergency elimination of federal law enforcement threats. Perhaps we could discuss these concerns in our surgical facility, where I can demonstrate the medical procedures that might explain these tragic patient outcomes. Cardiac surgery involves dangerous medical conditions that might appear suspicious to those unfamiliar with complex surgical work and international medical cooperation affecting transplant operations. Special Agent Torres agreed to examine Elizabeth's surgical procedures, not realizing that the surgeon was leading her to a secure operating room where previous murders had been committed and where Elizabeth planned to coordinate her elimination using trafficking network assets while staging the scene as federal agent targeting that occurred during medical investigation, providing cover for her elimination while appearing to be criminal retaliation rather than deliberate murder by a surgeon protecting her organ harvesting operations. But Elizabeth's carefully planned murder of the federal agent was about to be prevented by the unexpected arrival of hospital oversight officers who had been investigating medical irregularities and had identified connections to her systematic organ trafficking activities affecting surgical operations and patient care programs. Hospital Inspector Michael Santos had been conducting comprehensive investigation into medical trafficking and surgical corruption that exploited surgeon authority to facilitate organ harvesting and eliminate potential witnesses to trafficking operations affecting hospital oversight and federal medical law enforcement cooperation. Inspector Santos specialized in investigating hospital crimes and had developed expertise in tracking surgical operations that compromised patient safety while conducting systematic elimination of threats to organ trafficking operations affecting medical care and surgical operational security. The hospital investigation had been initiated by reports from multiple medical oversight agencies and patient advocacy groups who noticed patterns of suspicious surgical outcomes and medical personnel deaths, suggesting trafficking networks were infiltrating hospital operations to facilitate organ harvesting while eliminating witnesses through sophisticated methods disguised as medical complications. Depict. Dr. Elizabeth Hartman, I'm Inspector Santos with Hospital Oversight, he announced as he entered the operating room where Elizabeth was coordinating Special Agent Torres's elimination. I have medical warrants for your investigation on charges of systematic organ trafficking, medical corruption, patient exploitation, and multiple counts of first-degree murder related to your exploitation of surgical authority for criminal operations affecting patient safety and medical integrity. Elizabeth's reaction to the hospital oversight intervention was desperate attempts to maintain her medical credibility, as she realized that federal agents and hospital investigators had been investigating her trafficking activities and connected them to systematic medical personnel murders and criminal coordination affecting hospital operations. Special Agent Torres looked stunned as she realized how close she had come to being murdered by the surgeon she was investigating for organ trafficking. Her healthcare fraud investigation had not only exposed Elizabeth's trafficking and murder operation, but also prevented her own death at hands of a killer using medical authority as cover for systematic elimination of federal agents and medical crime investigation threats. The comprehensive investigation that followed Elizabeth's arrest revealed the full scope of her criminal enterprise and sophisticated methods she had developed to exploit surgical authority for systematic organ trafficking and murder. Forensic analysis of Elizabeth's surgical operations revealed extensive evidence of her trafficking activities, including sophisticated organ preservation equipment for illegal harvesting procedures, detailed records of organ sales worth millions, and comprehensive files containing patient medical information that had been exploited to identify harvesting targets and coordinate organ procurement affecting hospital patient populations. The investigation uncovered Elizabeth's connections to international organ trafficking organizations who had been coordinating medical exploitation and hospital corruption operations while using her surgeon access to harvest organs and eliminate witnesses through sophisticated methods disguised as medical complications and surgical accidents affecting hospital personnel and federal investigators. Most disturbing was discovery of Elizabeth's detailed knowledge of medical systems and organ harvesting procedures, which she had used to develop increasingly sophisticated approaches for exploiting patients while eliminating medical personnel who discovered her trafficking operations or threatened to expose her international criminal coordination activities affecting patient safety and medical integrity. Dr. Elizabeth Hartman was ultimately convicted of 12 counts of first-degree murder, systematic organ trafficking, medical corruption, patient exploitation, conspiracy with criminal organizations, and numerous other charges related to her exploitation of surgical authority for criminal operations affecting patient safety and medical integrity. The conviction sent unprecedented shockwaves throughout Boston General Hospital, prompting immediate reforms in medical oversight, surgical monitoring, and physician addiction prevention measures designed to protect patient populations from exploitation by corrupted medical officials involved in trafficking activities. Several other surgeons and medical officials were investigated for similar criminal activities, resulting in enhanced oversight of surgical operations and new requirements for procedure verification, patient protection monitoring, and federal cooperation. Measures making it difficult for trafficking networks to exploit medical authority for systematic organ harvesting operations. Special Agent Torres and Inspector Santos received recognition for their collaborative investigation and became specialists in medical crime investigation, developing new techniques for identifying organ trafficking operations and protecting patient safety from exploitation by corrupted medical officials. Dr. James Rodriguez and other surviving medical personnel required extensive psychological counseling and career rehabilitation to overcome trauma of learning that their trusted colleague had been systematically harvesting patient organs and murdering medical staff while exploiting her authority for trafficking activities. The case prompted comprehensive changes in medical regulation, including mandatory federal oversight and addiction screening for surgeons with patient care authority, enhanced monitoring of surgical operations and organ procedures, real-time federal supervision of transplant activities, and new reporting procedures for suspicious medical activities involving patient safety violations. Elizabeth's conviction led to increased cooperation between medical oversight agencies and federal organizations investigating organ trafficking, with new protocols designed to identify hospital systems that might be exploited for systematic criminal activities while eliminating witnesses to medical corruption and patient safety violations. 5 years after Elizabeth's conviction and life imprisonment, Boston General continued implementing safeguards designed to protect patient populations from surgeons who might abuse their positions for criminal purposes, affecting medical care and federal oversight. The surgeon who had promised to save patients' lives and advance medical science had instead used her medical authority to commit systematic organ trafficking and murder, while exploiting hospital resources for criminal coordination, threatening foundations of patient safety and medical integrity. Dr. Elizabeth Hartman's final operation had been permanently concluded by comprehensive investigation of hospital and federal justice, where she would serve multiple life sentences without possibility of parole, proving that even medical officials who attempted to exploit their surgical authority for criminal gain could be identified, investigated, and brought to justice when dedicated federal agencies worked together to protect patient safety from predatory medical corruption. The surgeon's final operation had ended with her permanent removal from medical practice, serving as lasting reminder that those entrusted with patient care must never abuse that sacred responsibility, and that medical officials who would exploit patient trust and surgical authority for criminal gain will ultimately face full consequences of their betrayal of medical integrity and patient safety. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.